never boxed in Ireland before, obviously is it's a must for us. But I want to do it at Croke Park. Like, I don't just want to go back to the Free Arena. We could have done this fight at the Free Arena, but we want that moment at Croke Park. And to do that, really, we need an Amanda Serrano or a big name of that ilk. So for us, it's a lot more positive now with Amanda Serrano, and hopefully, if Katie's triumphant at the weekend, we can move forward and try and make that fight.
Is there any other fights you would consider for Croke Park with Serrano, like with the winner of, say, McCaskill?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if McCaskill against Cameron is a Taylor Serrano or is a Shields Marshall next week, maybe that fight becomes big enough to do at Croke Park. You know, you've got other MMA fighters that could cross over, whether that's Holly Holm or Chris Cyborg or, Alicia Baumgartner, I don't know. But for me, as a promoter, the one that puts it on the line when you go into a stadium of that size, the one that I feel most confident with, and I think the one that deserves that platform is Taylor Serrano too.
It came out that Katie Taylor's the most marketable boxer in the world. What does that say about her legacy and what she's done for the sport? Not just women's boxing, but boxing.
Yeah, it's an amazing accolade. I mean, one of the problems that commercially you have with Katie Taylor is the last thing she's ever going to be is a sellout. So she's turned down hundreds, millions of pounds worth of endorsements over the years because she just won't do it. We've taken endorsements to her over the years for this brand and that brand. She's like, no, not for me. I'm like, no. What about the commission? But on a serious note, she's purer than they come. So, and that's one of the beauties of Katie Taylor. People talk about maybe she could do more from a publicity point or more commercially. Why not embrace the fact that she's not willing to do that? Because that's really the selling point for me, is you've got this unbelievable individual that's so driven by just the sport alone that after a tough couple of weeks in boxing, she's a shining example, of why this sport is so great.
I want to just move away from this episode slightly so that we push for time. Derek Chisora said he was going to ring you at the press conference. What would you have said if you'd have answered? Because Frank said you've gone into hiding. What would you have said if you'd have answered?
Well, I saw Frank going to hiding. I might have been doing 2 shows, one in Australia, one in Mexico. But I woke up in Mexico to about 4 missed calls from Derek Chisora. One on WhatsApp video, one on FaceTime video, one normal call. And he was just sitting there dialing me. I would have picked it up in a heartbeat if I was awake. Derek's Derek. I mean, I think there's been a lot of criticism around the fight. Obviously, he's my pal. We back him 100%. And I think that if there hadn't have been the first 2 fights, there would have been less criticism around the fight. Because when you do, I know Frank tactically went down his list, but when you do go down the rankings and there's another Brit and it's Derek Chisora, why not? And Derek will always give it 110%. So we wish him all the best.
I've got to move on to this. Simon Jordan labelled you a coward the other week. You've been on Talksport this morning to sort of give your side of the story. Where do you stand with all this? How sort of confident are you that Conor Benn will be able to prove his innocence in the coming days and the weeks ahead?
Well, that's over to him. I spoke on Talksport this morning. I thought Simon Jordan's comments were a little bit harsh, but that's what he does now for a living, and I think he's very good at what he does. I haven't had an invite from those guys to go on. I had an invite from Laura Woods to go on Breakfast Radio this morning. I went on, answered all the questions. During this process and during this legal situation, there's some things I can share with you and some things legally I can't. It's not about running away from a situation. I've no problem answering any questions about the process that unfolded and the decisions that we made. Some of which I think we probably could have done better. It was a very difficult situation and a lot was put on us very quickly to try and deal with what we were going to do. But it's over to Conor now. Conor Benn has the biggest part on his hands because he has to convince people that have already made up their decision that he's innocent. And we believe he is. And everything that's been digested from us, everything that we're hearing back from the scientists, we believe he is. But at the end of the day, he still failed a test. And ultimately, he has to give reason for that. Unlucky or not, contamination or not, it's still a fact. And all we want now is for him to go through a process. Because until he goes through a process, no one will give him any credit or time. We could go and box him. I could have done this fight in Abu Dhabi. I could have done it in America. I could have done it in Australia. I could have done it in all these places. He needs to go through that process. If he's banned, he's got to accept the ban and he's got to move forward. If he's suspended, he's got to do the same. But, it's a difficult situation all round. I just want him to have the chance to tell his side, which will happen ultimately this week. All of that from Conor. He's had several newspaper interviews today. I believe he's going in front of the broadcasters later this week as well. He's going to give all that information. Ultimately, that information has to come first in the hearing. and then he'll be able to share that with everybody, and you know, you'll get a chance to hear from him and hear his side of the story.
On Talksport, you seem to say that the B sample doesn't matter. If you just expand on that.
Yeah. The reason I say it doesn't matter, of course it matters, but in terms of contamination, which is everything in the results of this test, which you'll hear from, so I have to be careful because I want to tell you more, leads to contamination in this. When I talk about contamination, contamination can happen in a lab, and contamination can happen via various different means during a process, right? The B sample will only necessarily come back negative if there's been a contamination or a mistake in the laboratory. It's the same sample. So 99.9% of the times, the B sample will be exactly the same. It's been requested. I don't know the testing process with Conor. You'll hear from him. I would expect it to come back positive as well. Like, in all honesty, it generally always does. If it doesn't, fantastic. But the levels in this amount, surrounded by the other testing that took place, would lead to suggestion of contamination of some kind in this testing.
You also said that we hear excuses about the so we're not going to hear anything like Kevin Moreno when he said he took his wife's stuff.
Yep.
So he tested for cool.
And to be honest with you, that's another reason I believe he's innocent. Because believe me when I say, the easy way out in this situation for Conor Benn is to come up with an excuse that would either get him off the hook, sorry mate, or give him a shorter suspension time. Quite simply, I'm on fertility medication. My wife's on fertility medication. She's taking clomiphene. There was one in the house. I could have taken it. Mate, he could have given you that story easy. He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to lie in this situation. And when he gets in front of you, you know, don't forget, I've had these conversations a dozen times in the office with him, with his dad, with Tony Sims. You know, they've been emotional, they've been violent, they've been all these different things. And I believe this young man. Now, whether it's because he's my friend, whether it's because I've seen things that you haven't, whether it's because I have scientific information that you don't, that's just how I feel. So give him the chance and he'll come before all you guys. But ultimately, he still has to explain himself. It's not just going to be an interview where you say, I believe him, so off he goes. The results are the results, so we have to get to the bottom of it.
Finally, Chris Eubank Snr said he's coming after the managers and promoters involved in this. He referred to you on his top.
Well, actually, what Chris Eubank Sr. has been referring to, if you listen to it, is the decision to take the fight at £157. That's what he's not happy about. Again, I think it's unbelievably distasteful of Talksport to allow Chris Eubank Sr. to be interviewed at this time. That's all I'll say about it. He's obviously, you know, it's been a very tough period for him. He loves his son dearly, but Chris Eubank Jr. is his own man with a huge amount of experience, with his own team of people that will advise him to take certain fights. They believe that 157 was the right weight for this fight. Conor Benn had to go from 147 to 157. And, you know, ultimately, it's on Chris Eubank Jr. and his team to enter into an agreement that they feel is the right agreement for them.
There you heard AJ Dylan Whyte has been spoken about for next year, the rematch. Will we still be seeing AJ in this world tour that you mentioned earlier on? Yeah,
I mean, I think the situation with AJ is that he doesn't really want to have an easy fight. You know, we talked about a few options, whether that's Otto Wallin, I'm not saying that's an easy fight either, but, you know, he's like, what about Dillian Whyte? I'm like, well, that's a big fight. He said, yeah, but I just feel like, can I get myself up for easier fights? And they're all tough fights in that division. You know, they're all fights that can end like that. They're all tough training camps. So I'm not saying that the Dillian Whyte fight is on, but certainly if he comes through Jermaine Franklin on November 26th, we would like to try and move forward with AJ against Dillian Whyte.
And just switching on to Katie Taylor, of course, strength on cameras first and Jessica McCaskill. Could a rematch between Katie and Jessica be something on the cards if Jessica is triumphant?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Jessica McCaskill's never really had the credit in terms of what she's achieved. Like, she fought Katie Taylor in the lightweight, she moved up to 140, she won the 140 world title, she unified the title, she moved up to 147 to go and become